Here we go, folks. Another amazing episode of Talking Sense. Today I'm joined by one of my good friends, Sam Jacobs, and he is the founder and CEO of Pavilion, which is the premier community for high growth leaders. He also happens to be the host of a pretty darn popular podcast called Sales Hacker. You should check it out. And he just wrote a book, Why Kind Folks Finish First. And I'm about a third of the way through the book, and I cannot wait to talk to Sam more about it. Fun fact, Sam and I were both at the University of Virginia together in the late 1990s. There you go. Drum roll.
Also, fun
Sam
fact
Jacobs.
we're both from McLean, Virginia.
We're both from McLean, Virginia. We have a lot of it's so weird that we didn't know each other until 5 years ago, but it's all good.
It's great. It's wonderful. I'm glad to know you now.
All right. Your book. Let's start with your book.
Sure.
So I want to start by saying I think it is such a great mix of three things. I love that it's very personal and shares a lot of yourself and your connection to the universe and spirituality. And I love the vulnerability in it. It really, when you're reading it, folks, it feels like you're at dinner with Sam and he's just sharing his story. It's awesome. So I love that. I love that it also really goes behind the scene of Pavilion and the mission. It's a very mission driven company, which really comes through in your book. And then, you sprinkle a lot of great nuggets in there, the efficiency metrics we all need to know, just lessons learned about, running a great organization. So I think you kind of nailed it, Sam.
Well, thank you. I mean, to your point, the book is a mixture of personal stories. It's a mixture of lessons, and it's a story about the founding of Pavilion. I think the real point of it, though, is really the underlying ethos and the values that underscore why we started the company, which is, I go through the whole journey in the book, but the real point of it is that it's an effort to articulate to people that certain principles about reciprocity, about giving before you get, about building relationships, not transactions, those are all ideas not just to make you feel better, not just to sleep better at night, but to help you succeed professionally. And that's sort of the point of the book. When I was writing the book, the publisher said, should we call it the kindness principle? Should we call it, kindness as a virtue? And I said, no, that's not the point. The point of the book isn't about kindness as an end unto itself. It really is about a mechanism for achieving professional success. And so that's what the book's about. And I'm glad that you're a third of the way through. I'm honored.
So I want to know, I always like to ask, as someone who's also written a book but didn't really set out to write a book, why did you decide? It's kind of a lot to do. What made you think that you needed or wanted, why even do it?
Well, it's a good question. I think because I have a coach I talk to every Saturday, and he amps me up. He's a sort of mindset coach. So he's there. His thing is he tries to hold his clients in unconditional positive regard, right? A lot of people think I have a lot of shortcomings and flaws. He's not one of them. He's trying to hold me up and get me fired up. And so we were talking about the growth that we experienced, that Pavilion experienced through COVID. And, this was obviously an inflection point in all of our lives, and an inflection point in professional life writ large. And we were an in-person events business at the beginning of COVID. In March 2020, what we did was we did dinners all over, and we've done dinners in Chicago with 6 Sense, and we've done dinners all over the country. And we became a digital platform in the middle of COVID. And we went from, $1 million in ARR to $4 million in ARR. We went from about 800 members to 3,700 members. We just experienced explosive growth during COVID. And he really encouraged me to say, hey, this is a story that the world needs to hear. I'm obviously probably I do not hold myself in unconditional positive regard. So I don't think that I'm so important that the world needs to hear my story all the time. But he really said, hey, the world needs to hear the story that it's possible to succeed in business without being a complete jerk, or at least trying to avoid being a complete jerk. And so that's why I wrote the book. And I said, if I can think of something to say that I think would be interesting, and it tends to start with the title. I thought of the title, and I thought, okay, well, let's give it a shot. And then I pitched it to Wiley, and they said, Shannon, the editor that signed me, said, I'll get fired if I don't sign you to a book deal. So that was obviously a very nice thing to say. And so we, off to the races from there.
So one of the things I noticed in the book is you are very hard on yourself. And I was wondering, as someone who is also hard on herself, is that why is that something that successful people just need? Like, does that drive who we are?
Well, I think there's a mixture of ambition and compassion that's at play, and that's sort of the point of the book. The point of my book is I'm hard on myself, and it wasn't helping. That's the point, that one of the main points I make in the book, which is that for a lot of my career, I've been extremely competitive, extremely ambitious, but not in a positive way. I'd come at it from a place, and I wrote this thing on LinkedIn recently about high participation, low attachment, meaning I've always put in the work. So that's participation. Participation is you're participating in your life. You're mindful, you're engaged, you're doing everything you can. Attachment is how much you need certain results to validate your sense of self. And when you have high attachment, the universe has a way of, if you're grasping at something, it wants to kind of hold it back from you. The harder you push, the more it resists. And so I was hard on myself because I thought that that's what I needed in order to be successful. And it turned out the point of the book is that that was an impediment to success. That was not an accelerant to success. There's a certain level of discipline and motivation that is required when you're an ambitious person. But I think you have to come at it from a place of, as my coach would say, havingness, not necessarily desperation or needingness. And so again, I was hard on myself. My life actually started to change meaningfully when I became less hard on myself, when I became more compassionate and understanding to myself.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You talked about at age 23 having some number of millions. I forgot the number that you had.
12.8.
What was it? 12.8 million?
Yeah, by the time I was 28 years old. It had nothing to do with anything. I was in New York and working with all these investment bankers, and I just thought, I need to say that I'm going to be worth this amount of money or else. And I didn't know what or else meant.
Isn't that so ridiculous now, looking back on it?
Yeah.
And do you think that was the company you kept, or just...
Yeah, I think it's the company I kept. It's childhood. It's a sense of wanting, there's this Enneagram thing. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's like a personality assessment test, and it's 1 through 9 numbers, and I'm a 4. I'm like a classic 4. And the 4 in Enneagram is a person that feels a lot. I mean, this is going pretty deep into my psychology, but it's feeling a lack of love, perhaps from childhood, or a lack of affirmation, which manifests itself as a needing to be different in order to receive external validation from the world. And so, I just felt misunderstood for a long part of my life, a big part of my life. I felt like I wasn't getting the acknowledgement or the recognition that I wanted, which translates to needed, in order to feel a good sense of myself. And that manifested in terms of, I need these external validators to ensure that I am, the person that I want to be. And again, my transformation, my evolution has been about not being like that and trying to evolve and move past that.
And so what are the things now, like, would you say you're getting your energy from within? Or how do you
100%.
switch from need to self? Like, it's almost like you can be self-sustaining.
Yeah, well, it's practice. I mean, it's like anything, it requires practice. And so that is a practice. Again, I talk to my coach every Saturday. What do we do? How do we start? First, we start with a meditation. And then he goes through this whole ritual kind of expression about how our soul is infinite and the body and the mind and the thoughts are all manifestations of the soul, but the soul is permanent and eternal. A lot of woo-woo stuff. And then we start with, what are you proud of? What are you grateful for? And a lot of it is just training yourself to find positivity, training yourself to let go of need, of attachment, and being more comfortable and accepting of where you are and what you have. And that's, I mean, even we all watched White Lotus, and even though there's a lot of crazy stuff happening in that show, there's this scene where the guy Jack says, he's the fake nephew of Tom Hollander, but he says, if you can't be happy in this situation, then you're basically screwed. And if we compare ourselves and our lives and how we live every single day to so many other people currently in the world, and of course the billions of people that came before us, I mean, the world was, illiterate and in poverty. 98% of the entire world was in poverty just 200 years ago, 300 years ago. So the point is, we are objectively doing amazing as a species, and you and me particularly are doing amazing. And it's about just recognizing that and beginning to train yourself into how to think about that. And so that's, again, it's practice. What are my daily practices, for example? I try to, and this isn't about me being perfect. This is about, it's practice, right? It's like sometimes you do it, sometimes you don't.
Going to the gym and drinking water. Sometimes you do it. Sometimes you drink tequila and don't go to the gym.
Exactly. And I have literally a good day sheet where it's like 5 things, and one of them is drinking water, and one of them is going to the gym. I'm not even kidding. And the other is journal, like write long form with your hand. Another is try to do something nice for somebody else, and another is read, like just read a book. Doesn't have to be a business book. Read some kind of thing where you're quiet, you're still, with your glasses on, you're not watching Netflix, you're not watching sports, you're not drinking, but you're just trying to still your mind. So all of those things are part of the practice that I try to employ every single day. And honestly, one of the things that I do, and I talk about this in the book, and it's always like a little embarrassing or self-conscious, but I had this epiphany 3 years ago, and I realized that for me, it started with the voice in my head. And, there's this moment in the book where my friend Scott asked the question. He was asking me about my career, maybe the same way that somebody might ask you, Latany. And instead of saying, I am amazing, I've taken this company 6 cents from nothing to massive, and I am one of the leading CMOs in the entire world, particularly in high growth startup ecosystem. Instead of saying that, you might say, well, this happened and that happened, and it's not going that great. And my friend Scott asked, he said, does that help? And I said, does what help? And he said, does being a jerk to yourself, does it help? Do you get results? Regardless of whether you believe it, it's not about whether it's true. Does it help you get results? And of course, the answer is no, it doesn't. It doesn't. And so what I realized in this moment, this epiphany 3 years ago, it was just about almost exactly 3 years ago. I was on the rooftop of the one hotel in South Beach by myself. And I realized that I wasn't helping myself, and that I needed to be kinder to myself, and that I needed to actually vocalize and write out nice things about myself to myself. And that began a practice that's gone on 3 years of me writing almost every day. I love you, Sam, or I'm proud of you, or I'm not embarrassed of you. You make me proud. And it sounds silly and it sounds weird, and you sound so self-conscious saying it. And that doesn't mean I'm an egoist. It doesn't mean I think I'm not comparing myself to other people. This is not about I'm better than you. This is about things that are true. I try really hard. I try to be a good person. I'm not perfect and I'm not consistent all the time, but I try to do my best. I try to treat people well. And I've left my mark. I built a company. I wrote a book. I've put out a bunch of music. I'm doing my best when it comes to this brief period that we get on this earth. And so just that recognition, that's part of, that's a very long-winded answer to your question, but that's part of what gives you that space to say, I don't need. My coach always says, to he or she or they, but to he who hath much more shall be given. The person that has, more things come to them because they're not pushing against. They are in a period of receiving. And a state of receiving. And the person that doesn't is always pushing. And the universe, when somebody's pushing, it pushes back. So those are my life lessons. Exactly.
So mental health issues in sales. I'm going to talk about sales. I know Pavilion supports all business leaders, but it really started in sales, and you've got a strong affinity to salespeople with Sales Hacker. I feel like is something that is starting to be talked about more, and I think that's a very, very positive thing. And I know that's not where you went with this, but a lot of people that do struggle with mental health challenges have, ruminating behavior, negative self-talk, a lot, these are some of the byproducts of it. And it has to be treated. Like, you have to work on it. And so I just think opening the conversation up is so important. I think we found him through you. We had someone come to our sales kickoff to specifically talk about, mental health and taking care of yourself, because it is a really hard job. It is really competitive. And you are told that your worth is how much you book. I mean, you're kind of told that. You didn't make it up. And so, having a way to kind of cope with that, I think is a critical skill for people to learn if they want to thrive and not fail out.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And like with all things, especially in a remote world, it's not quite as easy as it sounds, because you also there's this balance, like with all things in life, right? There's balance and there's judgment. And the balance here is you don't want to be overly hard on yourself. You need to find positivity. In fact, if you're not a positive person, it's just in general, sales is going to be a really difficult career for you, because you're going to hear no more often than you're going to hear yes, no matter what. Mm-hmm. So you have to find a way to be positive. And at the same time, you also need to balance that tension between also not making excuses, between not allowing mediocrity to be a sign that you are burned out or that you're depressed, but really that you're pushing yourself to be, which is, again, high participation, low attachment. It's like, you got to do the work. There's no excuse for not doing the work. It's just about what kind of state of mind do you bring to doing the work? And you're right. It's important to talk about.
So let's talk about Pavilion, because you also share it in your book, and I obviously know a lot about Pavilion. But let's talk about. Sorry, let me ask that again. Okay. Here we go. So let's talk about Pavilion, also in your book, and obviously something near and dear to my heart. You said it went through rapid growth during COVID. How does it continue to evolve? Companies are living like organisms, right? And so what phase is Pavilion in now, and why do you think it's more relevant than ever?
Well, I think it's we are the word that I told the company, we are in our chrysalis. The chrysalis is like the cocoon, the larva that a caterpillar goes into before it emerges as a beautiful butterfly. We are in a state of evolution and metamorphosis, and it's been the most challenging year that we've had. Why is that? Because we had to go from being, a really cute toddler, and we're in our period of adolescence. We're a teenager, our voice is breaking. There's hair sprouting up. Yeah, exactly. Opposite. And we will emerge as a beautiful adult, but it's going to take a lot of work. Why is that? Well, because we were originally a community. We still are a community. Communities are notoriously hard to scale, because as they endeavor to become global, they lose their intimacy. They lose that sense of exclusivity.
It's kind of like saying we were the local general store.
Yeah, and now you want to be.
Now you want to be a chain, but that's what they went to the local general store, because it was a local general store.
That's right. It's a little bit like that, and so I've learned so much. I mean, I could talk for it at great length, but here's the bottom line: we've learned a lot of things this year. One of the things that we've learned is that community as a category is quite hard to scale, because it doesn't have clear product definition. Right? It's not the same thing as revenue intelligence or sales engagement or whatever, right? There's not a clear set of features that attach themselves to community in a way that people understand. It means something different to everybody. So we had to productize. That's sort of thing number one. We had to say, whatever you think it is, this is what it is for Pavilion. When you join, you're going to get three things. These are the three things. You're going to get learning through the online university that we've built. You're going to get in-person events that are amazing because everybody understands what that means. And you're going to get these small, what we call core groups, these small peer communities that you can interact with and talk to on a regular basis with monthly calls. That's it. If those things aren't appealing to you, then that's okay. But this is what we're going to do, and we're going to be really, really good at it. So, for example, we were not an online university when I first started doing this thing. But what we realized is that learning is a metaphor that's useful because people understand it. They can understand how to value it. People are used to taking online classes. They understand that you take an online class, you get a certificate at the end. And what we've done is we've done cohort-based learning. So you take those classes with other people. And as a way of doing that, you get to know other people and you build community in exactly the same way that you and me went to the McIntyre School, Latany. And, we took classes and we had study groups in marketing and
did projects together. And
exactly. And that was our community. And we weren't aware that, there's 20,000 people at UVA. What we were aware of is there's 300 people in the comm school and, 10 people in our study group. Mm-hmm. And for that made the world smaller for us so that we could navigate it and still provide that sense of community. So one of the things we've learned this year is you got to productize. The second thing we've learned is, you've got to continue to educate your customers on who you are and what you want to be. The third thing we've learned, and I've learned, is that A players hire A players and B players hire C players. And you've got to really think about the quality of the people that you bring into your organization because every single person is a representative of the brand. And, we had this concept of chapter heads and these people that represented our community in all of these geographic areas. And we went through a period where if you raised your hand and said, I wanted to be the chapter head, we would let you do it. And, you were the first Chicago chapter head, Latany, but then when you didn't have time to do it, we brought in somebody else. And that somebody else, while a very nice person, is not you, And when you've got a lot of people that are representing the community out there in the world that are not inspiring, that are not the people that you want to gravitate towards, then you've got to really think about how are we building this organization. So it's been a challenging year, but I've learned more this year as a CEO than I've learned at any time in the past. The entire history before this year was me riding the upswell of the market and telling myself I was a genius. And this is the year that I really realized I needed to improve and step up. And that's why
we're all in a kind of a hangover, to be fair. Yeah. I don't think it's just you. Talk to anybody. Look at all the stock market. So don't beat yourself up about the whole economic downturn. It's not your fault. You can put that in your journal. Latany says it's not your fault.
It's not my fault, but, I think let's use this as an opportunity to get better and to learn, and to the point, and part of that's mindset, by the way. Part of that, I was in the same place a lot of other people were. I'd never thought about making money from this thing, honestly, until we raised this money a year and a half ago from Elephant Ventures, and we raised $25 million, and it was a huge windfall, and it was amazing. And then I started thinking about making money from it and what's this thing worth.
And Elephant wants you to make money too.
Yeah, that's true. But I started doing the math, at 200 million and my percentage, that equals this much money. And at 300 million times my percentage equals that much money. And and that's not what got me here. That thinking like that is exactly what didn't get me here. Mm-hmm. What got me here was, hey, it doesn't matter about the money. The money will come. I got to figure out how do I make Latany more successful? How do I make Claudia more successful? How do I make the people that work at 6 Sense and Outreach and everyone else in startup land more successful? How do I commit myself to their success? And that's the mental evolution I've been on even over the last couple of weeks. Let me let go of any kind of financial outcome. Let me live within my means. Let me make sure that I can support myself. And if this thing takes 10 years, I'm getting good sleep, I'm meditating, I'm journaling, I'm going to the gym, I'm drinking water. That's how long it'll take.
Enjoying the ride. I had this epiphany this summer where I was like, oh my God, I'm going to be doing this a long time. Like, oh shit. Because you're grinding. And you think, oh, well, in a year, I'll be good. I'll be done. I kept thinking, oh, I'll be done. It'll be done. And I had this epiphany. just my personality. I'm never going to be quote unquote done. So I have to I got to enjoy the ride.
I talked to you when you were going through that epiphany, and it
Yeah.
had a big
And so
impact
I'm
on me too.
yeah. So I don't journal, but I think a lot about what makes me want to play. Why is this fun? Why should I want to be doing this? And it's got to be fun. And so for me, it's 8 out of 10 working days need to be fun. And I can design that. I am at a place now where I am in enough control of my life that I can do that, and I can do it for my team too. So why not, right? I shouldn't feel bad about that or guilty. So that was my epiphany.
Yeah, no, and I think you mentioned it. Are you framed it as is it the infinite race, or
The
is
infinite
it
game. I took it from
right?
Simon Sinek. I mean,
Yeah,
who doesn't
and
love Simon Sinek? The guy's awesome.
I've heard funny stories about him, but yes, yeah, exactly. You got to. It's not about if you're racing to the moment. I need this to happen. I need us to go public. I need to be acquired within 6 months, or I am spent. I do not have another ounce of energy left to give to this thing. That's what I'm talking about. High attachment. That doesn't work. Maybe if it works, you're lucky, but most of the time what you're doing is you're pushing it further away because you're showing up with that desperation in every interaction with somebody else. You're scared, you're nervous, you're white knuckling it. So you're right. For all of us are going through this hangover. I mean, of saying, okay, I might have to do this for a long time. I'm sure 6 cents might be for us to catch up to the last evaluation. It's going to be a while. So I better buckle up, continue to serve our customers. You've got an incredible product. You've got great technology. It works.
Giddy
So
up.
let's go. Let's giddy up.
So I want to talk. So this is kind of tactical, but I think it's actually really important, specific to Pavilion and your dinner format, because I got to say, I throw a lot of dinners. I go to a lot of dinners. A lot of them suck, other than the good meal. And whoever you're sit next to, you're kind of stuck with them. The venue's not right. And you are very particular. That's one of the things I like about you is you are particular. You're very particular about the dinner format. So what makes the dinner special? Share with the listeners the format, because that's, I think, going to make them want to go.
The headline is the thing that makes any interaction or engagement special, in my opinion, right? Are there times when you can just throw a random party and it's great? Sure. But generally speaking, a point of view and curation, entering someone else's world can be really immersive and enriching. So what does that mean? That means that, exactly to your point, Latané, I don't like going to most dinners because the people don't want to do the work of making them engaging. So how do you make a dinner engaging? Well, what's more fun? Talking to the person that you happen to sit next to, where maybe they're great, and maybe you talk to them. It's like sitting next to the right person on the plane. Maybe you don't. What if you sit next to the wrong person on the plane? Well, then you're stuck. Isn't it better to be part of a big conversation for 10 or 15 people where everybody's participating? I don't know if you've ever been in a dinner where you're talking to the person and you hear something really interesting down at the other end of the table.
And you're ooh, can you just really strain in your ear?
I know. And they know, and the person you're talking to knows you're not listening to them. So here's the point. The point that I'm making is there should be a host to the interaction, to most interactions, that guide you, because most people want to follow the rules. They don't want to make up their own rules as they go. The second thing is there should be an opportunity for everybody to participate. And one of the big rules is no crosstalk, right? This is not a thing where you sit down and everybody starts talking amongst themselves and nobody can hear. There's one conversation at the table that's moderated by a host. And that host has the mandate to not just engage everybody, but to specifically try and call out the wallflowers, because what is fascinating to me, as I've hosted hundreds and hundreds of dinners, if not thousands, is that you see people and you say, oh, they're shy, they probably don't want to contribute. And then you say, okay, Sally or Latané or Jeff, whatever, what do you think about this problem? What's the challenge that you're working on? And all of a sudden they come to life. And all of a sudden you realize.
And they're like the smartest person. Just the loudest person is not the smartest person.
The loudest person is not the smartest person. And the quietest person is not necessarily quiet because they don't want to say anything. It's because they're just waiting for an invitation. They're waiting for an on-ramp into the dialogue. And so part of what I'm, of course, I have, I think inside of me, for whatever reason, I have a lot of feminine energy, and I am particularly sensitive because most of the time the loudmouth is the man. It's typically 2 or 3 men that are just used to shouting the whole time. And it's not that they're very useful at the beginning because they warm everybody up. But at a certain point, you need to get, yeah, exactly. You got to pull them and say, what do you think? What do you think? And so part of it is just making everybody feel appreciated and not cursory, not superficial, but a genuine curiosity and empathy in every single person at the table. And then an ability to move on and to actually moderate, to say, okay, we've talked about this for a little bit. You have a sense of the energy of the room. You have a sense for the energy of the dinner. It's time to move on. And then at a certain point, it's like you move from these extremes, moderation and structure begins to feel confining in and of itself. There's a certain point at which you're like, all right, Sam, stop telling me what to do. I would like to just hang out now. And so there's a point at which you loosen the reins, which tends to be as people have more alcohol. And that tends to be when dessert comes. And by that point, you can say, okay, everybody talk amongst yourselves. And that's when certain people pull up their chair and they go sit next to somebody else. So it's a mixture, but it starts with structure, and it starts with structure that is designed to make everybody feel psychologically safe, warm, and included. And then from there, you go on to devolve into a little bit more sort of friendly anarchy. But as you can tell, I have a strong point of view about it. And I think the thing that lazy people do is they just say, oh, nobody likes structure, so we're just not going to have any. It's like, that's not true. That's not how it works. You're probably not very good at
it. Well, the one that I went to in London, what I liked is everyone said their challenge, and then we went around and just focused. So one person, it was almost like the whole table focused just on that one person's business challenge, and they got all of our attention. And it was like having, and we all had different points of view, and it was just great. I mean, people really, it was awesome. Good moderator. Well done, Pavilion.
and then the big thing there is, and then you just got to have that sense, that intuition, that judgment of, you know what? And it's been 10 minutes and it's time to talk about somebody else's problem now.
Yeah, he had like a kind of almost like a buzzer. Like we had to go, but it was awesome. So I want to go to some of the questions that we're asking everybody.
Sure.
And one is, as someone who's been just immersed in sales as a practitioner and as, founding Revenue Collective and with Sales Hacker and now with the launch of the new Revenue Collective Pavilion, how has sales changed?
There's no room for dumb. There's no more room for dumb. The technology, I mean, first of all, right, like it used to be, there was no outreach. There was no sales loft, right? It was, you were sending, I remember 10 years ago or 12 years ago, my best salesperson would open up 50 tabs and he'd have a copy and paste template in Microsoft Outlook. That was how he did sales.
The shortcuts.
Yeah, just like send. Mail merge, does it had to change the name of the person. So that enabled, they call it personalization at scale. That's not true. It just enabled spam, but it worked. It worked because people weren't used to it. They were caught off guard.
Yeah.
And now it doesn't work anymore, or at least it works much less well. And that's because it's irrelevant. And it's because you can tell my attention, all of our attention is absorbed. There's TikTok, there's Instagram, there's LinkedIn. There are 50 shows on Netflix, a new streaming service every day. There is something to occupy our mind at any moment of the day. There's blinking lights in Slack. So how are you going to get somebody's attention? What is the thing that separates you from the robots? The thing that separates you is humanity and creativity, is nuance, is storytelling, right? And that's not going to be... That is a skill that not everybody has. Mm-hmm. So the value, technology is going to eat and commoditize more and more and more of the skills that just hard work. It's John Henry versus, the steam engine, right? Technology will eat First thing it's going to eat is the hardworking person that's going to send 50 emails, because now outreach can do that at once. Okay, the next thing is technology is going to eat the person that does multi-channel, because these engagement tools are going to be able to do multi-channel automatically. The next thing it's going to eat is commodity messaging, right? Your speeds and feeds email to get somebody's attention isn't going to be interesting. So what's going to change? And then now we've got ChatGPT, right? Now we've got AI, like mediocre writing is the next commodity that will be eaten by technology. Like if you're a good writer, you're going to stand out more than ever, because the AI will write emails as good as your average account executive or your average SDR. So what is the role of the human being in this interaction? The role of the human being is to tell a really interesting, profound story. The role of the human being is to be interesting unto themselves. And the role of the human being is to be personalized, is to be genuinely curious and interested in you in a way that is hard to replicate and copy. So how is sales changing? It's becoming more and more competitive, and the best people are going to separate themselves because robots are going to take care of the rest. And it's going to happen very quickly. It's not going to happen tomorrow, but it's going to happen within 5 to 10 years. I think
especially right now, like I think that things that maybe people wouldn't have adopted as quickly I think the next 2 years, generative AI, increased automation, there's still laggards that haven't done, the sales loft out, like still haven't, right? I think it's going to become even more mainstream because people are all trying to be more efficient.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's what it's about.
And so I think that's why, anyway, so I think technology will absorb the dumb part of what we do, and it's going to put a lot of pressure on all of us to be interesting, original, and creative. And obviously not everybody's like that. And, I don't have an answer for what happens to all those people that can't adapt.
We talked about creativity I had Amy on, and that's one of the things that we talked about. But, I also think it's like, my challenge is, you think about a frontline SDR team and the expectation of business context. Like, I think that there's a lot more we need to train on related to just, business relevance too, right? Because it's like you can be interesting and creative, but maybe kind of out there. But when it comes to work, like, help me do my job. And it's sort of hard to help me do my job if you don't understand my job. So I also think there's a lot more like training they're going to need to do and absorb, and just, business acumen that is going to be required to be successful.
And that's a lot of what we teach at Pavilion. Exactly to your point. It's like, you can be interesting and creative, and it's about pictures of yourself and talking about your personal journey of exploration. That's not really interesting to you as a CMO. So how do you express an understanding of somebody's job? Well, you also have to be interested in it. It's really hard to fake if you don't care at all.
If you don't care at all, it kind of goes back to kind people finishing first. You got to care. Right? Yes, you do. You really have to care. So, robots can't, that's one thing robots can't do.
Yet. They can't do it yet.
All right. So we right now have a campaign going, and it's all about confidence. It's a challenging time, but we believe with, we want to power that next generation of seller and make them more savvy, give them better insights. And you're familiar with what we do, of course. And so we've got this campaign, Proceed with Confidence. And so I'm asking everybody because confidence is a big word. So I'm asking, what does that mean to you? And what are some of the things, and we talked about some of them earlier, so maybe one new one that give you confidence?
Well, I mean, for me, confidence, like I said, we talked about it. It's about compassion for yourself. That's where it starts. You can't love other people if you don't love yourself first. And so for me, that's about accepting yourself. And, I just read this tweet today it was a reference to Elon Musk, but it's like, I certainly don't have imposter syndrome anymore after watching, what some of the world's most successful people, how they think, and watching their thought process and realizing they're complete idiots in a lot of the ways that they lead their life. So
we all are everyone's crazy.
Yeah,
it's just a matter of degree.
For me, confidence and proceeding with confidence is a couple things. But again, it relates to this concept of high participation, low attachment. This is not an excuse not to do the work. You're going to have to do the work. But come at it from a place, first of all, of being content with yourself. And then second, because everybody going into this recession, whatever we're doing, everybody's looking inward. Everybody's like, my costs, my success, my quota attainment. But your customers are thinking about themselves. They're not thinking about you. And the way that you move away from thinking about yourself is if you have a sense of contentment, if you have a sense of peace within yourself. So try to lean into, what do my customers need and what do their customers need? What do my customers need? And if you can be thinking about it like that, you can be in a position to be helpful to people as they navigate this time. And that is the thing that can enable your success. That's my opinion. That's my word about proceed with confidence, which I love.
Love. Okay. Last question here. Last question. You cannot get off the show without sharing a colossal F up, because we learn more from our failures than our successes.
Of course.
So, tell us something that you kind of messed up and learned a lot.
I talk about it a lot. That's sort of what the book's about. I've been fired 4 out of my last 5 jobs before I started working on this one. So I would say those are 4 F-ups. And then the 5th one that I wasn't fired from, I quit because I thought they were going to run out of money. So what did I learn? You know what I learned? And this is the point of the book. The point of the book is, there's a big section called You're Not a Victim, right? And there was a period where I got fired and would speak a lot of poop about, my former bosses and talk about how they were such jerks and idiots. And I realized that I had a lot to do. Every relationship is 50-50, and I had a lot to do with those failures. And so for me, getting fired was about taking responsibility and accountability for my behavior and what it did to contribute to those toxic situations. And so that's, and I'll give you a specific example. As an executive, I got in the habit of going to work for somebody else, not respecting them, and, sort of rolling the eye roll. The eye roll is a classic young person thing. And by young person, I don't mean 15. I mean like mid-20s, early 30s, right? Isn't this person an effing idiot kind of eye roll? And the issue is that that was my problem, right? My problem, the deal when you're an executive or anybody that goes to work for a company with where the CEO is somebody other than yourself, is that by definition, you are buying into their vision. That's what it means, right? The CEO runs the show, whoever he or she is, and they set the vision. And if you don't agree with that vision in that direction, that's not their problem. That's your problem, right? If you can't accept the fact that they're the boss and they are making those decisions, if you think they're such an idiot, if you think you could do it better, that's great. Go do it better. But don't stand there and grumble. Don't stand there and complain. And it's like a relationship where instead of breaking up, you either can break up or you can be happy together. But standing there staring at each other saying how much you dislike each other is not productive, right? And so for me, the lesson is like, it's in a way, it's like shit or get off the pot, but it's you work for somebody else, find a way to get happy, find a way to support their vision. If you can't do that, don't sit there and be toxic. Go do something else. Mm-hmm. And that was a failure that I had, that I exemplified.
We called it water cooler commandos.
Exactly.
People that would kind of hang out in the shadows and like bash everything,
And the reason is because it's like eating, watermelon Sour Patch Kids, which is like they're delicious, but they don't nourish you. You're not going to grow bones and muscles from eating Sour Patch Kids. It's like eating candy. You get a sick feeling when you eat too many donuts. It doesn't help.
So lay off the donuts. And
exactly.
And you got to support the vision of your CEO. Otherwise, just go do it yourself. The words to live by.
Words to live by.
Sam, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me, Latané. Great to see you. And thanks for all your support.
Listeners are going to get a lot out of this. I love this. High participation, low attachment. If you get anything out of it, that's what we're trying. I'll need to strive to do. So thanks again for coming on, and everyone listening, check out Sam's new book, Kind Folks Finish First. Also check out Pavilion, the premier center for executives.
Absolutely.
All right. Bye, Sam.
Bye.